The checkbox field type is another really helpful one because it allows you to check a check mark for a field. Very often what we can see are things like, has this person been onboarded onto our company? It could also just be a simple yes or no question that people answer. That's always a really great place to use a checkbox. You can also check off something if you've completed a task. That's one way to do task statuses as well. So the possibilities are really endless with this field. In the database, I'm going to add a field called, is this business women-owned? You can also change the different styles of your checkboxes. Oh, actually, it looks like that's on a pro plan, but if you have a pro account, you can change the different options for your checkboxes. But really, if you have a free plan, the green check mark works perfectly fine, and you don't need all the design. Checkbox fields are often used through automations as well. Sometimes we'll run an automation and then come back and check the checkbox field afterwards. We'll talk about that use case more in the automation section. The next set of fields we're going to talk about is the collaborator type fields. So they're called collaborator, last, modified by, and created by. I've obviously been an Airtable dinosaur. When I first started using Airtable, these three fields did not exist. So when Airtable finally launched them, probably about a year ago, by now I was super excited to work with them. And they've been tremendously helpful, and we have lots of them in the databases we build for our clients. Inside of Airtable fields, you can also pick different collaborator types of fields. So one of them is the collaborator, and this is anyone who has access to your Airtable. You can also pick the created by field. This is going to show which person in your Airtable created a particular record or a particular row. You can also look at last modified by, which is who last edited that particular row. For example, back on my clients table, I'm going to add a collaborator field called the project lead. The collaborator field is helpful because you can select anyone who is part of your database. In this case, you can either select Cherry or Nicole. After Cherry or Nicole get selected, or any one of your collaborators get selected, they will also be notified that they've been assigned as the client lead in this scenario. This is really helpful if you want Airtable to send a notification right away when you assign somebody to a task, when you assign someone to a project, etc. There are multiple ways of setting up that notification automation. In this scenario, it's very simple. As soon as you attach the person, a notification is sent. The way I normally prefer to do this is actually building a list of my team members on an internal teams table. And I think the advantages of that is you can capture more information on your internal team. For example, when is their birthday, what is their bill rate, what team they're on, etc. It just allows you to capture fuller information on that team member. And you can still set up notifications to go out via either a Slack integration or a Gmail integration or some other kind of automation tool. So the difference is that when you have a list of internal team members on a table, you can capture more information about them. Whereas when you have a list of collaborators, that's just limited to whoever you've shared your database with. So if you have external collaborators who are freelancers that you might want partial access to the base and you might need to assign them some work, that's a much better use case to just have everybody's names listed on a separate table. It's an important distinction. So while the collaborator field is very easy to make, do make sure you're careful about how you're approaching it. The next two fields, which we're going to talk about together, are the created by and last modified by fields. These two are both automated fields that Airtable will fill in. They're super helpful when it comes to internal users updating your Airtable records. The limitation to these two fields is that when someone adds a record via a form, it will always say unknown. And the reason is because Airtable can only see who created a record if it was that person adding it in. For example, when I created Cherry's Coffee Shop, you knew I was working inside of the database, so Airtable put down my name. However, now if we add a project using the form, the created by field is going to be unknown. I've just submitted a form to create a project, and I'm also going to add in the created by field on the projects table. You can see that this is an anonymous person who entered in this project. I'm a huge fan of the created by and last modified by fields. They are super useful in keeping track of who last edited your data, and it really just helps the team communicate on what was done last, and it helps the team communicate. The created by field and any of the collaborator fields are also fairly recent additions. They've been added about a year or so ago, so I was very excited when Airtable finally added them. There are also a variety of date fields that you can build inside of Airtable. The created time and the last modified time fields are very similar to the created by and the last modified by. They're a really complementary set of fields because you can see when someone created the record and also who created the record. Same thing with when someone last modified it and who was the person who last modified it. When you specify the created time, you can specify in terms of the day or in terms of the hour and minutes. So if you want to include time, you can turn this toggle on, and if you want to leave it off, you can do that as well. You can also choose to show the time zone in GMT or show the local time zone. It's going to be the same thing with the last modified time. In the last modified time, you can choose whether you want to display the last modified time based on when all the fields could have been edited. You can set the last modified time based on a specific field or any field that was modified. If you want to choose a specific field, you can choose the fields within your Airtable. And you can see that my created time and my last modified time are different. Typically, the last modified time is always going to be more recent. Something that we'll often set up for clients is to look at the last modified time of a particular status. So you might want to understand when the status was last updated for a given project. And that's a really great use case for monitoring the last modified time for a specific field. The next field type we'll talk about is the date field. You can add dates in Project Management Base for start dates, end dates. You can add dates for birthdays if you have an employee tracking database that you're working on. There's lots of different places where you can use dates. I'm going to add a field called the start date. And you can see that there are some different formatting options that we can select. You can choose the different date formats. You can also choose to include a time. However, because we're just tracking the project's start date, we're going to toggle off the time option. And then you're going to create the field. You do want to be quite careful about the dates and times, especially when it comes to time zones. If your team works in several different time zones, then I would recommend selecting the option that says Use GMT for all collaborators. This option will allow your team to see the same time for every single record. It's especially important if the team's across different time zones, and soon enough, you're going to hate time zones like I do. Time zones are notoriously difficult to work with, both within Airtable and in any kind of development setting. And if you have a few minutes, I'll link you to a YouTube video on why you should also hate time zones.
Thanks for investing in your own knowledge base. I'm Cherry Yang, the founder of Claribase. We're going to be releasing our flagship course, Airtable Mastery, for free. In the course, you can find over 100 videos on topics like design, integration, automations, and interfaces. It's perfect for the Airtable champion who wants to build their database right the first time. You can sign up for the course at the link down below.